Out of the blue comes a new team of detectives from Brazen Gate CID.
This man's in charge here. Nobody goes until he says so.
Convictions. What were they last week, eh? Votes for dolphins.
Not till it walks it off the street, bang, look at me, I'm a big boy.
Hey, Becky, how's it going?
It's DS Bennett.
Well, I think straightforward in my life. Less to go wrong with. Know what I mean?
A new team, a new drama. Out of the Blue, Tuesday night starting 23rd of May, BBC1.
Comedy that packs a punch on BBC2 shortly. It's Fist of Fun.
The continuing story of the BBC at war sees the birth of the war correspondent.
Hello, BBC. This is Godfrey Talbot.
Hello, BBC. This is Frank Gillon. Recording just outside Chile.
With landmark reports from Winford Vaughan Thomas crossing the Rhine and Richard Dimbleby at Belsen.
He gave us so much hope that we are not alone now anymore.
To finding Montgomery a puppy. Its role as propagandist is reviewed.
The BBC radio had been a weapon of war.
In What Did You Do in the War, Auntie? In half an hour.
The main evening news before that on BBC1 with Michael Burke. It's 9 o'clock.
The government's promising an average £20 a year off electricity bills by selling the nuclear industry. But the taxpayer may still have to pick up the bill for decommissioning old nuclear power stations. World leaders have honoured Russia's old soldiers but boycotted her present forces because of the war in Chechnya. And the Deerstalker Express gets a reprieve. A Scottish judge says the Highland Sleeper can't just be killed off. Good evening. The government's been giving details of its plans to privatise the nuclear industry, which are expected to raise around £3 billion. As we reported last week, the modern power stations, presently operated by Nuclear Electric and Scottish Electric, will be sold to private investors. The taxpayer will continue to own the older stations and pay for them to be put out of commission. The government says electricity bills should fall by up to 8%. The opposition says it's just a way of raising money to pay for tax cuts.
When the government failed to sell off nuclear power 5 years ago, it looked as if it was destined to remain state-owned. But now ministers are confident of privatising much of the industry next year and cutting electricity prices into the bargain.
It will make our industries more competitive, it will lower prices for the consumers, and it will create, with the modern part of our nuclear industry, a company that is able to continue its advance and to win contracts overseas.
This is how the sell-off will be done. Nuclear Electric's 6 most modern reactors are to be privatised, merging with Scottish Nuclear's 2 stations. But Nuclear Electric's 6 old Magnox reactors will be retained in the state sector. It was the huge cost of decommissioning the Magnox stations which scuppered the government's last bid to sell the industry. It was funded by a levy on electricity bills. That levy is being ended 18 months earlier than planned. That could mean taxpayers meeting any shortfall. But more immediately, it'll lead to reductions in domestic bills from next April.
You'll both increase competition in the generation sector, where there's a woeful lack of competition at the moment, and that will have a long-term effect on prices, and in the short term it means that the nuclear levy will go, which means that electricity prices will come down by 8%.
In the Commons, opposition parties said privatisation had more to do with raising cash for tax cuts than industrial necessity.
Madam Speaker, the President's statement today could be succinctly summed up as the private sector gets a cut price bargain, the taxpayer gets the bill.
It should come as no surprise that to make privatisation work, he's had to cherry pick the profitable bits whilst leaving the liabilities with our children for generations to come.
There's anger in Scotland, where Scottish Nuclear wants to stay independent, despite the government's decision to locate the headquarters of the merged company north of the border and retain some of the shares.
The history of Scotland, the recent industrial history, is littered with broken commitments, and no one in Scotland has any confidence in Michael Heseltine's undertakings or golden shares that turn into base metal.
The industry now has to win over the city, and it's confident it can be done.
We will now be free to compete on equal terms with the other generators in the UK market.